It is so wonderful to speak to all of you today using the power of technology that connects all of us together. I feel so privileged to share some of my adventures working with children and getting their feedback on technology, specifically using mobile technology. Now, the topic of my presentation today deals with kids' perspectives on mobile apps. Which ones are good, bad, and a downright waste of time? But before I begin, let me just briefly introduce myself. My name is Suzanne Lapp, and I am a professor at Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton, Florida. And now I teach secondary teachers, and secondary usually qualifies them to teach in grades 4 through 12. Grade 4 basically starts with children who are about 9 years old, and grade 12 students are about 18 years old. So it's a wide range of grade levels. Now, my particular area is I teach English reading and language arts and writing methods, and I use technology as I teach these methods. I've been teaching for well over 20 years in a range of different ages, from kindergarten all the way to graduate school. And as you can see from the picture, one of my other passions is travel. And in this particular picture, I'm actually taking a lovely cruise along the Mosel River in Deutschland, Germany. But I don't want to talk any more about myself. What I want to do is I want to bring our conversation back to what I was originally talking about, which involves technology. Now, I thought I'd start out by discussing issues that are really of particular concern to children, particularly, once again, children in grades 4 through 12. Now, no one can deny that children's lives, no matter what age they are, have grown more stressful and fraught with demanding activities. Now, you can see here we've got a collection of young men who are very actively involved in soccer. I thought soccer was probably an appropriate sport to consider here, considering I'm speaking to folks who are in Brazil. But sports is not the only thing that impacts the lives of children. As we well know, academic demands are also increasingly becoming more and more a part of children's lives, occupying their time, stressing them out as they prepare to take standardized tests, study a host of different subjects, and prepare themselves for university training. Now, of course, one other very important element that we must consider that are specific to the lives of children involves, of course, preparing them to become good citizens, good people. And we as parents and teachers strive to make sure that we have children that are respectful of each other, respectful of adults, and respectful of the environment. And we can go on and on and on with this topic. But in the past 15 to 20 years or so, children's lives have become increasingly more complicated through the use of technology. Now, we could spend hours and hours discussing each of these factors along with many, many more challenges. But today, I'd like to focus on the use of technology and its impact on the lives of children. Now, technology has many purposes and far-reaching implications, and we've seen both examples that are beneficial of technology as well as not necessarily beneficial. In this example that I've provided here, I am showing you how technology can be used for good. In this particular example, an article shares a story of a young man who had somehow been misplaced from his family, and through the use of the Google app Earth, he was able to reconnect with his family in India. So that's an example of a positive use of technology. On the other hand, technology unfortunately can also be used for evil. In this particular example, we show some negative implications of technology. And in this example, it demonstrates how a television station's app used as a story about a criminal activity of a young man. And unfortunately, the results of this discussion served to create an unpleasant situation with some serious racial implications in the comment section. Nevertheless, technology, and specifically mobile technology, has drastically changed the way that children are expected to learn in the 21st century. Now, fortunately, we're probably not going to encounter many classrooms that look like this one. In fact, this photo was taken from a classroom back in the early 1900s, United States. But the question actually still remains. Are teachers ready for the changes that are being brought about by the use of technology in the classroom? Teachers must find a way to respond to these new changes that are being forced upon them. Now, in this example, what you see below is rather interesting. You see a child who is surrounded by beautiful, attractive displays that have been created by adult museum curators in an effort to engage the child in learning. But unfortunately, as you can see, the child below has absolutely no interest in the displays, and in fact is finding more interest in the mobile device that she's playing with, and we're hoping that she's using these devices to learn and to extend her area of interest. But as educators, we must find ways to reach out to children to learn to engage them in meaningful learning. And what we might do in this situation is take our cue from some of the well-known researchers that are in the field of education. In this example, I am referring to the work of Howard Gardner and looking for his guidance as we seek ways to incorporate technology into the classroom. In fact, Gardner has stated that new technologies make the materials vivid, easy to access, and fun to play with. Technologies readily address the multiple ways of knowing that humans possess. So it should really be our goal to try and create a classroom that embraces change and welcomes a new form of learning. But that type of change is not very easy to come by. It's very difficult to convince teachers that they must create a school environment that embraces a more dynamic and technology-driven learning environment. Now, I mentioned that it's hard for this to come by. However, there are certain external motivating factors that actually bring about change. One of them is probably an assessment system that you are all well familiar with, and we in the United States are becoming increasingly familiar with. And these are the PISA studies. In 2012, the PISA results really tended to shift the attitude towards education. Suddenly, we found politicians and business leaders in the United States shocked and disappointed with American students' performance on the PISA exams, and especially when they compared the United States scores with the rest of the countries that participated in the PISA exams. But as we like to say, and if we think in a positive fashion, competition stimulates change. And the competition that we are witnessing among the United States and its other countries is bringing to bear on how we are changing our educational system in the United States. So the USA is desperately looking for ways to become more challenging, to challenge their students, and to possibly improve their scores on the PISA exams. Now, one such method is the adoption very recently, in fact, in the last year or so, to the Common Core state standards. Now, this has not been a very easy adoption. In fact, many states, including the state of Florida, are still trying to find ways to adapt the standards that are currently in existence to the national standards, the Common Core state standards. Very briefly, the Common Core state standards argue that in order for American students to remain competitive with the rest of the world, students need to have a curriculum which prepares them for colleges and careers. In other words, students need to have robust and real-world instruction which reflects the knowledge and skills that they're going to need once they reach college, or if they choose to assume a career after high school. Now, there are a host of issues that the Common Core addresses, but very interestingly, Common Core takes a very serious look at the use of technology. Now, it's probably very difficult for you to see these different categories, but I can summarize by saying that the Common Core is strongly pushing technology into the school curriculum in an effort to improve a host of student abilities. But I think three categories are really worthy of consideration. And the three categories that I have listed include research, problem solving, and communication and collaboration. The Common Core is really looking for ways to improve students' abilities to critically think, problem solve, become effective decision makers, and be creative and innovative in their thinking. However, there is an issue, and the question still remains. Are teachers, first of all, able to comprehend and incorporate the demands of the Common Core standards? And in addition, are they able to incorporate these standards using technology in the classrooms? Now, that becomes especially difficult when you consider the impact of the digital divide. And I find this little cartoon to be rather interesting. Of course, the image below of the confused individual more or less represents parents and teachers, and the huge bridge that they must try to cross in order to be able to effectively prepare children for the demands of the future. Now, when we think about the digital divide, we have to see that the divide is actually separating students and their parents and teachers. Students, who are often referred to as digital natives, have grown up with technology, yet their parents and teachers are often referred to as digital immigrants, or people who have to learn about technology in their adult years. And this places a great degree of challenge on parents, teachers, and students. As the research shows, young students are very well adept at using technology to do a host of purposeful tasks which are communicative and research-oriented. In fact, Wahlberg has done some research on middle grade students in grades 4 through 6 and have found that indeed these students are much more proficient in the use of multimedia tools than their teachers. In fact, these students use technology or media over 11 hours a day to do a variety of different activities, including, of course, participating in social networking, downloading a lot of material, and gathering information from a wealth of online resources. The demand for material that is relevant and connected to their lives is very much apparent in the lives of students and their teachers. So, we have a problem. What are we going to do? How are we going to be able to make those necessary changes in our curriculum to address the standards and the use of technology in the curriculum? Well, one of the most effective solutions that I've thought of would be to actually engage these young experts in planning for the changes. And in an effort to do this, focus our attention more on the ideas of student-centered learning. Now, I have listed here several components that I think are very necessary when considering a student-centered curriculum. Obviously, student-centered curriculum is grounded in constructivist learning theories. And student-centered learning is really looking at addressing contexts that are most relevant to the learner. Learners have to construct their knowledge based on their experiences. And as teachers, we need to truly accept and incorporate the students' beliefs and values in the learning opportunity. And learning in and of itself is a collaborative process which involves multiple perspectives. So what I'd like to do now is to share the project that I am engaged in right now. And this is based on some of these ideas related to the idea of student-centered learning. Now, the project that I was involved with was to use student experts to help create an evaluative rubric or instrument designed and inspired by kids. And the kids that I'm talking about are kids in grades 2, 5, and 7. So these children would actually be around 7 years old, 10 years old, and 13. And what they would be doing would be addressing students' abilities to research, to problem solve, and to communicate and share their ideas and knowledge with others. Now, the rubric was designed along the guidelines of the newly devised Bloom's taxonomy. Now, here I'd like to show you an example of my project designers. They wanted to make sure that they appeared on this particular presentation, so here they are. But it was very interesting. When I sat down with these young project designers, we started to talk a little bit about their experiences using mobile technology and mobile apps. And it was very interesting. They instantly came up with two distinct categories. The first category involved fun apps that they'd like to use in the classroom, and school apps, or apps that they were actually using in the classroom. So when I asked them to define fun apps, they said mobile technology tools that we use for fun and to relax. School apps are technology apps that our teachers think we should use in the classroom. So we started to talk about the differences between the two apps, and we decided to focus on 4 specific apps, 2 school apps and 2 fun apps. Let me introduce you to the first school app, Edmodo. Edmodo is a very popular school app. It is generally designed for teachers. It's teacher-directed. Essentially, in Edmodo, the teacher creates assignments and tests which students must complete. Grades are easily then assigned to each student. Now, it was very interesting when I questioned one of my project designers. She gave me a very interesting bit of feedback on Edmodo. In fact, she said, "I hate this app because my parents can see where I make mistakes, even when I'm just experimenting with ideas. I do not trust Edmodo." And I thought that was rather startling to hear that. But we went on and we discussed the second type of school app that many of these project designers were familiar with, and that involved Edline. Edline is essentially an intranet system which establishes communication between the teacher and parents. Parents are able to keep track of their students' academic progress, and they're able to address the child's homework, their assignments, as well as their test proficiency. Now, what we found through these discussions were that neither of these apps, neither Edline nor Edmodo, were engaging students in learning, but were instead used for teachers for record keeping. So we sat down together and we talked about learning and what was important to them as learners and what was not important to them as learners. And their comments dovetailed very nicely with Bloom's taxonomy of learning domains. And this is an example that I found on Bloom's taxonomy. Now, the taxonomy has changed. In 1956, Bloom came up with his taxonomy, but it has been modified now to focus on these several categories. Now, for our purposes, we looked specifically at the cognitive domains, including remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. And what we found was that these concepts very nicely fit with the fun apps that the kids really seemed to enjoy and focus on. Now, the first app that I want to talk about is Minecraft. And what you can see right here is how we constructed the rubric to align itself with Bloom's taxonomy, which is on the left column, and the students' evaluation of how the app actually addressed their learning. And I can give you some examples, and you can follow along later in the guidelines that I'm sending. But as far as Minecraft is concerned, in terms of remembering, what one of the students said is, when I use Minecraft, I have to remember where I've placed my items, where I've placed my animals, which is an important component in the Minecraft game, and I have to learn where I go to get my resources. Now, it was very interesting because the students started to apply a number of different categories that were specifically related to Common Core. In the example where we have applying, the student said, I can use this app to become an architect when I grow older. And I found that very interesting because obviously that certainly addresses the idea of college and career planning. We went down throughout the various categories addressing analyzing, evaluating, and creativity. Now here's another example of what a Minecraft activity actually looks like. On the left you can see that it is a graphic representation of a world. And the student can design the world to focus in on any of their interests. They can design buildings, they can create resources, they can have livestock, animals, and what have you. And some of the comments are very interesting. Alex, who's age 14, said, Minecraft is an app that schools need to use. I can explore new ideas in a challenging way, and it is very exciting. Ellie, on the other hand, said, this is the way that learning should be. A second app that we used and focused on for the fun app is an app called Toontastic. And Toontastic, both Minecraft and Toontastic can be found on the iOS Apple apps, and Minecraft is also a very popular Web 2.0 tool. Toontastic is found specifically on the iOS system, but it again very nicely addresses Bloom's taxonomy. Toontastic is probably geared more for younger children rather than the older ones, but it is essentially a storyboard activity where the children creates essentially a story or a play and have to incorporate a number of story structures as they create their play. So what the feedback on the Toontastic app was very interesting. When the child considered the category of remembering, she responded by saying, you have to remember who the characters are in the story. You have to make sure that the setting of the story makes sense with all of the characters. And you must have an interesting ending so that people will actually be interested in watching my cartoon. And again, I have a host of different responses following Bloom's taxonomy, but you can follow along with that in your guidelines as well. Here is the video that actually addresses Toontastic, and the response of the child was, I love to use this app because I can create any type of story. My friends love to watch my cartoons, and we all have a good laugh. So, we're at a crossroads right now as teachers. We need to decide, where are we going to go? Are we going to try to adopt apps or technology that are going to be engaging and allow kids to make some very important decisions in their world? Are we going to be the teachers who embrace technology, who no longer avoid using technology in the classroom? But in order to do that, we have to answer some critical questions. Are we going to be the teacher who creates students to be consumers of technology? Or are we going to be teachers who will encourage students to become producers of technology? Or are we going to have students who are going to lead with technology? All I can say from my experience is that it is an exciting time to be an educator. And I encourage all of you to begin your journey, to reimagine education, and to consider the role of educational instructional technology in your classrooms. Thank you very much. Have a lovely conference. Goodbye.